Hello everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu news analysis. So today is 8th May 2025 and today we have some important news articles for the discussion. So one by one we'll try to discuss all these important articles in a very detailed manner. And the first article, which is very important article, and this is important for your Gender Studies paper 3, right? So in fact this article has been widely covered, and this is widely covered because Indian security forces have conducted Operation Sindoor, which primarily targeted the terrorist camps which are located in different parts of Pakistan. And in fact, we have been discussing that these terrorist camps which are located in Pakistan are training terrorists and they are sent to Indian side. And these terrorists are primarily responsible for a number of terrorist attacks on India. Whether it is 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks, Uri terror attacks, Pathankot terror attacks, or the recent Pahalgam terror attacks. So most of these terrorist attacks have been sponsored by Pakistan-based terrorist organizations or terrorist groups. There are number of terrorist organizations which are based out of Pakistan, such as Lashkar-e-Toiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Hizbul Mujahideen. So these are the major terrorist organizations which are located in Pakistan, and they are sponsoring the terrorism into Indian side and creating large-scale violence and bloodshed. As an attempt to destroy all these terrorist camps, the government of India and the Indian security forces have conducted Operation Sindoor to dismantle these terror networks in Pakistan. And in fact, it is a very good news for us that the government of India has conducted such a brave operation to dismantle, destroy the terrorist networks which are located all across the LOC and also the Pakistani side. And in fact, India has used a number of weapons, so we'll be discussing about that as part of the Operation Sindoor, but it is being said that it is very carefully planned military operation, and it is non-escalatory in nature because Indian security forces, as part of Operation Sindoor, they have not targeted the military establishments. They have not targeted the civilian establishments, or they've not targeted the civilians, they've not targeted the military establishments of Pakistan, but they only targeted the military networks in Pakistan. So you can see on this map that India has identified total 9 targets to initiate these terror strikes, right? So hit these terror camps. You can see here the first one was Markhaj, Subhanallah, Bawalpur. So this is the terror camp of a terrorist organization called Jaish-e-Mohammed. So second was Markaz Taiba Mordik. So it is a Lashkar-e-Taiba terrorist camp. So similarly, there are 9 terrorist camps are located. You could see here most of these terror camps are located all across either Indian border or across the line of control. So once these terrorists are trained and they are sent to India to create a large scale violence or a bloodshed, and the Pathankot terror attack, Uri terror attack, and recent Pahalgam terror attack, all these terror attacks are sponsored by these major terrorist organizations, whether it is Hizbul Mujahideen, whether it is Lashkar-e-Toiba or Jaish-e-Mohammed. So therefore, the Indian security forces have primarily targeted these terror networks all across Pakistan. And in fact, the context is that, as I have already told you, that the context is that on April 22nd in Pahalgam, so 26 tourists were massacred or brutally killed by these terrorists. So in order to take a revenge against such a massive terrorist attack on Indians in Jammu and Kashmir, the government has carefully planned a military operation, and they have named this military operation as Operation Sindoor. So the context is that Indian military has launched multiple strikes, multiple missile attacks. These missile attacks primarily targeted the terrorist infrastructure which is located in Pakistan and Pakistani administered Kashmir. and they have called this particular operation as Operation Sindoor. And in fact, this is not the first time that the Indian security forces have launched such an operation against Pakistan. However, there were a number of instances in the past also where the Indian security forces have launched such a massive operation against Pakistan and the terror networks which are located in Pakistan. And in fact, the missiles were actually India's response to April 22nd attack on tourists in Kashmir in Pahalgam. And in this terror attack, 26 Indians were killed. And when we talk about Operation Sindoor, so Operation Sindoor is a meticulously planned military operation. So it is well planned, a carefully planned military operation from the Indian side, an offensive on the Indian side, and Operation Sindoor primarily targeted these terrorist infrastructure in Pakistan and the Pakistan occupied Kashmir, because Pakistan is known for supporting the cross-border terrorism. So Pakistan has been supporting the cross-border terrorism, and because of continuous support of cross-border terrorism by Pakistan, India has been continuously suffering. And it is very, very important that we need to adopt an offensive stance against terrorism. And in fact, before Narendra Modi's government came to power at the center, before 2014, India's stance was a defensive stance. So this was the stance that the Indian government has largely adopted. We secure our borders, we protect our people. But offensive was rarely an option for the governments before 2014. But after 2014, the stance of the Indian government has changed. Now the stance of the Indian government is offensive defense. Offensive defense. So this is the stance of the Indian government. So along with protecting our people, securing our borders, so we will also adopt an offensive path if it is required, if it is necessary. So that's why this particular operation is called as a military offensive. This Operation Sindoor is a military offensive, and that has primarily targeted the terrorist infrastructure in Pakistan and Pakistan occupied Kashmir. So the policy is offensive defense, right? So this is offensive defense policy, and that's why after 2014, whenever you see any major terrorist attack, you could also expect India's response against Pakistan as well. And in fact, when Pathankot, when a Pathankot terror attack took place, India responded with surgical strikes. And when Uri terror attack took place, India responded with Balakot air strikes. Now also, because of Pahalgam terror attack, Indian government responded with Operation Sindoor, destroying the terror networks which are located in Pakistan. So in fact, it is being said that Operation Sindoor is the biggest anti-terror operation. So it is a biggest anti-terror operation that India has conducted after 1971. We all knew that in 1971 India-Pakistan war took place, and in 1971 Bangladesh also liberated from West Pakistan. So Bangladesh became a new nation. So in this 1971 war also, you could see a large scale military offensive that has been carried out by India. But after 1971, this Operation Sindoor is termed as a biggest anti-terror operation that has been carried out inside Pakistan. However, the immediate reason that has been cited for the operation was to deliver justice to the victims of Pahalgam terror attack. And Indian government is determined that there is a need to provide justice to the victims of Pahalgam terror attack, and at the same time there is a need to send a strong message to Pakistan that India will not sit silent whenever any such major terror attack took place in India. so that Pakistan will withdraw its support to the cross-border terrorism. And here it is very, very important that Pakistan should be convinced and compelled to withdraw its long-standing support to the terror networks. And that's how the regional peace can be installed, or that's how regional peace can be ensured. However, India actually framed Operation Sindoor not as a one of a reaction. So this is not a reaction by the Indian government, Indian security forces, but it is a response to decades of Pakistan sponsored terrorism, and that was dating back to 2001 parliament attack. So in 2001 also Indian parliament was attacked. So even after Indian parliament was attacked by the terrorists, there was no such offensive that has been adopted as a policy by the Indian government. And in fact, in 2009, when there were Mumbai terror attacks, then also Indian government not adopted a major offensive stance against the Pakistan. Right? So, but now the government has adopted an offensive stance against such terror attacks. So it would likely create an effect of deterrence on the part of Pakistan. So doctrine of sub-conventional targeting. So we'll understand what exactly is this doctrine of sub-conventional targeting. So this particular convention is emerging after the wake of the Operation Sindoor. So we'll try to understand what exactly is doctrine of sub-conventional targeting. Now India has actually maintained its doctrine of limited strikes. So limited strikes primarily target the terror infrastructure, but the limited strikes, our strikes are limited. That essentially means that our strikes will not target the military establishment, will not target the civilians, because that would result in escalation of the tensions between India and Pakistan. And the other thing that we should understand, both India and Pakistan are the nuclear powered states. So because of in this context, it is very, very important that these strikes should not result in a large scale escalation of tensions between India and Pakistan. So therefore, India has actually maintained its doctrine of a limited strikes, and these limited strikes primarily target the terror networks or the terror infrastructure, but not the Pakistan's military. However, 2016 surgical strikes and even 2019 Balakot A strikes and even the Operation Sindoor also. So all these different operations primarily have followed this particular doctrine. So this doctrine aimed at not targeting the military establishments, but only targeting the security, only targeting the terror networks which are located in Pakistan. And in fact, these operations avoided escalation into a full-scale war, because we are not targeting the civilians and we are also not targeting the military establishments. And secondly, it will send a signal that terrorism will be met with a proportionate and a precise force from the Indian side, right? So through the doctrine of sub-conventional targeting, these two objectives would be achieved, and that's how India has adopted the doctrine of sub-conventional targeting. So sub-conventional targeting essentially targets the terror infrastructure, but not the Pakistani military establishments. And in fact, the Ministry of Defense after Operation Sindoor also stated that no Pakistani military facilities, military establishments have not been targeted. So they have not been targeted. And in fact, this indicates an effort to retain the strategic restraint while maintaining or demonstrating the operational resolve on the part of India. Right? So it is being said that India has largely maintained the strategic restraint when it comes to carrying out such a large scale precision attacks on terror networks, terror camps in Pakistan. So on this image, you could see that how these terror camps, which are located all across the line of actual control in Pakistan. And in fact, Operation Sindoor primarily targeted these terrorist camps. And in fact, as per the Ministry of Home Affairs, so around 100 terrorists were killed as part of this Operation Sindoor. And in fact, it is also being said that the mission objectives have been fulfilled by the Operation Sindoor. This is not the first time that the Indian security forces have carried out Operation Sindoor or any such operations in the past also, right from India's independence, several such operations were carried out, particularly against Pakistan. So there is a list of such operations which were carried out by the Indian security forces against Pakistan, and it is very, very important for your prelims examination. So the first operation is in 1965, Operation Ablaze has been conducted by the Indian security forces. So this particular operation aimed at preemptive mobilization of Indian Army in April 1965, particularly after the Rann of Kutch clashes between India and Pakistan. And in fact, it has demonstrated India's readiness before August War of 1965. And after India-China War in 1962, so we also have India-Pakistan War in 1965. However, Operation Iblis has actually demonstrated India's readiness before the August War. Secondly, Operation Riddle 1965, that was again carried out by the Indian security forces. So India's military response to Pakistan's infiltrations, because Pakistan, as part of its own operations such as Operation Gibraltar and Operation Grand Slam, so it started infiltrating into the Indian territory. However, in response to Pakistan's infiltrations into Indian territory, the Indian security forces have launched Operation Riddle in 1965, and that led to full-scale war, and finally the 1965 war between India and Pakistan ended with the Tashkent Agreement. And third major operation that the Indian security forces have conducted was Operation Cactus Lily 1971. And this a major Indian offensive in East Pakistan. So remember that after India's independence, Pakistan was also emerged as a new nation. However, Pakistan was divided into East Pakistan and West Pakistan. So East Pakistan was the present day Bangladesh. However, because of the Bangladesh Liberation War and India's support to Bangladesh, in 1971, Bangladesh emerged as a new independent nation. However, during India-Pakistan War 1971, Operation Cactus Lily was carried out by the Indian security forces. And in fact, the Operation Cactus Lily was also a major offensive in East Pakistan by the Indian security forces. And it has involved Meghna River crossing and aiding rapid advance to Dhaka, and even aiding Bangladesh total liberation from Pakistan. And similarly, Operation Trident was carried out by Indian Navy in the year 1971. And in fact, the Operation Trident was a successful military operation by Indian Navy. And as part of Operation Trident, Indian Navy strikes on Karachi Harbour on December 4, and that has caused major damage to Pakistan's navy and its fuel reserves. So Operation Trident is very, very important and very significant also, so kindly remember this. So the fifth major operation was Operation Python. Again, this Operation Python was also conducted in 1971. This was a follow-up naval strike on Karachi post Trident. So after Operation Trident, again Indian Navy has conducted Operation Python as well. And it has further damaged Pakistan's naval assets, and it has even disrupted the logistics as well. And Operation Meghdoot, that was conducted in the year 1984. So Operation Meghdoot primarily related to the Siachen Glacier, because Indian security forces have conducted a preemptive occupation of the Siachen Glacier, and it has also secured a key passes like Bilafondla and Siala to deny Pakistan control. Right? So with respect to Operation Meghdoot, you have to remember this is with respect to Siachen Glacier. And other important operations were also conducted, but we knew mostly about these three operations. So Operation Vijay, that was conducted during or as part of the Kargil war between India and Pakistan. So this was a military operation by the Indian security forces as part of the Kargil war, and it primarily aimed to evict Pakistani intruders from Indian territory along the line of control, and it has helped restore the status quo as well. And Operation Safed Sagar 1999. So Operation Safed Sagar was Indian Air Force flagship campaign against Pakistan during the Kargil War of 1999. And as part of Operation Safed Sagar, Indian Air Force primarily targeted enemy positions at high altitude to assist the ground operations. And similarly, when the Pathankot terror attacks, Uri terror attacks took place, so India was responded with surgical strikes in 2016. So the surgical strikes were a cross LOC strike by the Indian Special Forces, and they primarily targeted terror launch pads in Pakistan occupied Kashmir post Uri attack. So Uri was an air base of India, and in that air base, terrorists were attacked. So in response to Uri terror attack, we have conducted the surgical strikes. And in fact, 2016 surgical strikes also marked a shift in India's response doctrine. So India's response doctrine was offensive defense, right? So that was India's doctrine. And Operation Bandar, that was conducted in the year 2019. So Operation Bandar was in response to Pulwama terror attack, because in 2019, Jaish-e-Mohammed camp, there was a strike on Jaish-e-Mohammed camp in Balakot post Pulwama attack. So in fact, it was considered as a first cross LOC air raid since 1971, led to India-Pakistan aerial face-off as well, right? So finally, Operation Sindoor 2025. So we knew the context that on April 22nd, terrorists killed tourists in Pahalgam Valley, and as a response to that, Indian government has carried out multiple missile strikes or air strikes on terrorist camps which are located in Pakistan, and as per the Home Minister, more than 100 terrorists were died in Operation Sindoor, and Indian government has also declared that the operation's objectives have been achieved. However, one significant aspect of Operation Sindoor is that it has showcased the tech-driven retaliation on the part of India. So India's capability to strike targets which are located deep inside Pakistan. So I hope it is clear and you have understood all these different operations. And next, another important topic. This has been given in the Hindu newspaper, particularly the editorial section, and this is important for your General Studies Paper 2 International Relations section. Now, in this context, we will understand India-US energy future, particularly in the context of a growing convergence between India and US. And India and US also have shared interests and they have a growing convergence. So because of this particular reason, India is a country which is looking for achieving energy security. So it is very important for us to achieve energy security. And in fact, we also looking for a green transition away from the fossil fuels. So green transition and energy security requires capital. It requires capital. It requires a large scale investment. It requires technology. It requires critical minerals. Right? So because of all these different reasons, India could likely benefit from a strong collaboration with US on the energy front. Because with such a collaboration, India can achieve energy security. So we would achieve energy security if we have such a strong collaboration. And India will also be able to reduce its dependence on fossil fuels, because as of now we have been substantially or significantly dependent on fossil fuels, and 85% of our fossil fuels are imported from other countries. And in fact, when we burn fossil fuels, so fossil fuels would emit the greenhouse gases, and greenhouse gases are the sources of the global warming, and we will not be able to meet our commitments in a near future. So India must reduce emissions from the fossil fuels. And in fact, if you look at the energy basket in India, the total energy production in India, near about 55% of energy is produced from the thermal power plants. And these thermal power plants primarily use coal for the production of energy or electricity. So because of that particular reason, we need to switch over to renewable form of energy, renewable fuels. And along with renewable fuels, we should focus on green hydrogen. So we should also focus on nuclear energy. So on all these different fronts, US will help us significantly and substantially. So in this particular article, we'll be discussing India-US energy future. The context, what is the context? So recently we had seen that US Vice President J.D. Vance visit to India. And during this visit, he reaffirmed cooperation with India on energy and defense fronts. However, India has also highlighted certain areas such as energy security, technology transfer, critical minerals as a key bilateral focus areas. Right? So for US, collaboration with India on defense and energy fronts important. But for India, energy security is an important domain. Technology transfer from US to India is also important, and focus on critical minerals is also another important area for India. Right? So in fact, India also joined recently US-led Mineral Security Network. So Mineral Security Network to secure the critical minerals for India, because remember that India dependent on other countries, particularly on China, for the critical minerals. So supply chain resilience of critical minerals is also very important. So for that, we have been focusing on diversification of the supply chains. So as part of diversification of supply chains, we would look at other countries which could potentially ensure the mineral security for us. And because of this particular reason, so India has joined hands with US to ensure mineral security for itself. Now we'll understand certain programs or initiatives that India and US have launched together. So one such program was a strategic clean energy partnership between India and US. And this strategic clean energy partnership focuses on biofuels, solar energy, hydrogen, and even the energy efficiency. Right? So in order to achieve energy efficiency, we need technology. And in fact, US is a country with a substantial capital and investments. It is able to develop. It has, in fact, it has the technology. So with that technology, if India can achieve that particular level of technology, we would also ensure the energy efficiency, and that's why a strong collaboration with the US is very, very important. Secondly, US-India Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technology. So it is also known as ISET initiative. And it actually focuses on clean technology, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and even the small modular reactors. Before also we have talked about the small modular reactors and their importance as well. So therefore, a small modular reactors would completely revolutionize how the way we have been producing nuclear energy. And third was a nuclear energy cooperation, and this nuclear energy cooperation also includes technology transfer and even potential investment in India's 100 gigawatt nuclear goal. So we would like to achieve 100 gigawatt of nuclear energy by 2047. right? So a strong cooperation with US in nuclear energy cooperation is very, very important. And critical minerals memorandum of understanding 2024. So this critical minerals memorandum of understanding 2024 would target resilient mineral supply chains and third country co-investment, right? So these are some initiatives that India and US have launched together, which primarily focuses on energy security, critical minerals. And in fact, you could also see the objectives of ICIT. So initiative on critical and emerging technologies. So it focuses on artificial intelligence research. It focuses on strong defense cooperation and collaboration between India and US. And a strong, robust innovation ecosystem would be developed. And a semiconductor development would also be prioritized, because for India also semiconductors are imported and we have been heavily depending on other countries when it comes to semiconductors. And 5G, 6G technologies and cooperation in human spacecraft as well. So these are the important areas or target areas of the initiative on critical and emerging technologies between India and US. Now, why such a partnership is very, very important for both India and US? So why it is very important and very significant? So this particular partnership between India and US is important because energy security that India wanted to achieve, because as of now India is looking for energy security. We should not dependent on other countries to import fossil fuels. So because we have been substantially dependent on other countries for fossil fuels, so therefore India needs a predictable energy supply with a minimal disruption to fuel its $5 trillion economy goal. So India also wanted to become a $5 trillion economy. So therefore, in order to fuel the 5 trillion economy goal of India, so we need a stable and predictable energy supply. And in fact, India's total energy imports crossed 153 billion US dollars in the financial year 24. And in fact, this is a huge amount of imports from other countries. However, if we have achieved self-reliance in energy production, and if we are able to achieve energy security, so this bill must be saved. And in future, energy demand will increase manifold, and this number will also increase manifold. So therefore, self-reliance, self-sufficiency in energy production and also energy consumption is very, very important for a country like India. And similarly, India also have some ambitious goals. India has ambitious goals, such as India wanted to become net zero by 2070. So what exactly is net zero? So net zero is the balance between the total carbon emissions that we emit and the total absorption capacity of the carbon. So whatever carbon we have been emitting, so we have the capability to absorb that particular carbon. So this is what is called as net zero, and we wanted to become net zero by 2070. So therefore, it actually needs a diversified low carbon energy, including nuclear energy, renewable and green hydrogen as well. Similarly, so we have some other important targets as well. So they include, we would like to increase the non-fossil energy capacity to 500 gigawatts by 2030. And in fact, we also wanted to meet 50% of India's energy requirement from the renewable energy by 2030. And in fact, reduce the total projected carbon emissions by 1 billion tons from now till 2030, and even reduce the carbon intensity of our economy by less than 45% by 2030. So we wanted to achieve all these important goals or objectives. And apart from that, supply chain resilience is also another important aspect that we would like to focus, because when it comes to critical minerals also, we have dependent on countries like China, because as of now it is being said that 90% of rare earth metals and their processing is controlled by China. So therefore, we need alternative partners so that we could diversify the supply chains of the critical minerals, and that's why it is very, very important that India needs to collaborate with like-minded countries like US. And the other thing that a strong India-US collaboration is required is that, so we need capital, we need investment, we need technology to make a faster and a rapid transition to the green forms of energy. So for that, we require a rapid infrastructure financing, because the nuclear power alone require 180 billion by the year 2047. So therefore, it has been highlighting the need for investment, the need for capital and technology. So US now stands as a country which could actually provide technology, capital and investment to India, and it will also help India achieve its energy self-sufficiency. And what should be the way ahead in this context? So when we talk about the way ahead, so we need to amend the Civil Liability Act to allow the foreign and private capital. So as of now, it is being felt that the Civil Liability Act is considered as a roadblock for foreign and private capital coming into India. This is particularly with respect to the nuclear energy sector. So the Civil Liability Act, so it actually maintains that in case, imagine that a nuclear power plant is established by a private company. So this nuclear power plant is established by private company in India. So in case of any major accident that took place in this particular nuclear power plant, and in this nuclear power plant a private company has a major investment, or private company has been managing this nuclear power plant. So in case of any accident, so the total responsibility is on that particular private company. So because of this particular reason, the private capital is not coming to India into this nuclear energy sector. However, in this backdrop, a recent Holtec's SMR Tech transfer to L&T and Tata Consulting needs legal safeguards, right? So SMR is a small modular reactor technology, right? So Holtec has decided to transfer the small modular reactor technology to L&T and Tata Consulting Services. However, since this particular private company is ready to transfer the technology to other private companies such as L&T and Tata Consulting Services, so it is very, very important that these private companies must be provided certain legal safeguards. So in order to provide legal safeguards, we must amend the Civil Liability Act. So by this, we could attract more and more foreign and private capital into India's nuclear sector. So thereby, India will achieve the target of generating 100 gigawatt of nuclear energy, and it is also expected that by 2047 nuclear energy or nuclear power plant infrastructure alone requires around 180 billion. So that that requirement, that demand can be addressed if we provide legal safeguards by amending the Civil Liability Act. And secondly, there should be a joint strategic mineral stockpiling between India and US, right? For example, we have the strategic petroleum reserves in several places, right? So for example, Mangaluru, Visakhapatnam, we have a strategic petroleum reserves, and US also has a national defense stockpile. So therefore, a joint strategic mineral stockpiling between India and US will help hedge the supply risks, right? So a supply chain disruptions of critical minerals. So therefore, both India and US should have a joint strategic mineral stockpiling. Third, so both India and US should launch a mineral exchange, and they should also create a secure digital hub for traceability, trade and co-investment using blockchain, particularly on critical minerals. And even both India and US are members of the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, or Quad. So since both are members of the Quad grouping, so they should expand the trilateral mineral partnership with Australia and Japan. Remember, along with India and US, Australia and Japan are also members of the Quad grouping. So therefore, both India and US, along with other countries, should strengthen their mineral partnership and processing, research and development, and even the African outreach as well. And similarly, the nuclear deployments should be fast tracked, right? Particularly standardizing designs, cutting down approval time, and even building 5 to 6 gigawatt of nuclear annually by early 2030s as well, and that will help India achieve the target of 100 gigawatt of nuclear power, and we would also substantially reduce our dependence on import of fossil fuels from other countries. And similarly, there is a need to restructure the domestic lending, and also there is a need to enable green bonds or multilateral funding for nuclear and minerals, because they are capital intensive, they need capital. So in order to ensure adequate capital is available for achieving energy security, energy self-sufficiency, there is a need to restructure domestic lending, and also enabling green bonds will address the needs when it comes to the finance requirements or capital requirements. So the next important topic is about the identity question of Pakistan and Bangladesh, and this is a question which this is an article that has been given in the Hindu newspaper, and this might be important for mains examination. Even for your essay also this could be important, and even for gender studies paper 2 also this is important. Now it is being said that both Pakistan and Bangladesh have been going through the identity crisis. They don't have their own identity, because of that particular reason they are very often depending on the identities, or they are trying to imitate the practices of other countries, right? So in this context we'll understand this, because the identity crisis of Pakistan and Bangladesh, or Pakistan, started after the theory of two state, right? So the Muhammad Ali Jinnah during Indian freedom movement, so he came up with this theory of two nation. So two nation theory, it is popularly called as a two nation theory. The context is that, so recently Pakistan's army chief General Asif Munir, so during his speech, so he started reasserting on the two nation theory. Now what exactly is a two nation theory? So that was popularized by Muhammad Ali Jinnah during the freedom movement. So during India's freedom struggle, so Hindus and Muslims were two major communities. So they used to live together, and however the communal seeds were sown by personalities like Muhammad Ali Jinnah, telling that Hindus and Muslims interests are different, Hindus and Muslims cannot live together. So that's how the communal seeds were sown by the individuals during the Indian freedom struggle. However, British also tried to divide Indians on religious lines, and because of the British policies of divide and rule, it was further culminated into the theory of two nation or two nation theory, and ultimately the partition of India and Pakistan. So however, recently Pakistan's army chief reasserted a two nation theory. And apart from that, the context is that Bangladesh also started demanding an apology and reparations for 1971 war atrocities. Remember that Bangladesh was part of Pakistan, and then it was called as East Pakistan in the year 1971. Till 1971 it was called as East Pakistan. However, there was a liberation movement in Bangladesh because of the discrimination that they have suffered in the hands of people of West Pakistan. So racial discrimination, language discrimination, political discrimination, economic discrimination. Because of all these reasons, in eastern part of Bangladesh a liberation war started, and in this liberation war Pakistan military has committed a lot of atrocities, and ultimately Bangladesh became a separate nation with the help of India. But recently what has been happening is that, so on the one hand, a Pakistan army chief reasserting the two nation theory, and on the other hand Bangladesh has been demanding an apology from Pakistan, and it has also been asking reparations for the 1971 war atrocities that Pakistan army committed on the people of Bangladesh. So ultimately it has reopened South Asia's unresolved historical and ideological questions which are existing. So thereby it exposed Pakistan's continuous dependence or reliance on religious nationalism, historical denialism, and the internal repression. So we have seen the internal repression when it comes to the repression of Balochistan, and in fact the freedom, civil liberties of the people of Balochistan. And in fact they are completely dominated and discriminated by the people of Pakistan, particularly from Punjab region. So that is an example of internal repression in Pakistan, and Pakistan continues to deny history, and Pakistan is also continuously relied on the religious nationalism. So therefore the author has been telling us that these things have exposed Pakistan's weaknesses. So now why Pakistan's army chief reasserted on the two nation theory, right? So in April 2025 he invoked the two nation theory, and he claimed that Muslims and Hindus are different, right? So he said that Muslims and Hindus are fundamentally different in religion, tradition, culture, ambition. So therefore ultimately, so he tried to promote what? Religious nationalism in Pakistan. So he tried to promote religious nationalism in Pakistan, or religious essentialism, and that is the source of the sustenance for the elites in Pakistan. So how elites in Pakistan are sustaining themselves? Through the religious essentialism or religious nationalism, and they view this religious essentialism as the basis of national identity. But on the other hand, India is a secular state. But Pakistan has been sustaining itself through religious essentialism or religious nationalism. Secondly, nationalism was used as a political distraction in Pakistan, because Pakistan as of now has been going through a lot of problems, right? So it has been facing the economic crisis, higher levels of inflation, the Balochistan problem that it has been facing, Balochistan militancy, and apart from that, the government, the civilian government, is completely under the control of the army. And similarly, terrorism, Pakistan hosting the terrorist organizations, and Pakistan has been continuously supporting the cross-border terrorism. So a number of problems that Pakistan has been going through. However, Pakistan has been using religious nationalism and religious essentialism as a tool of political distraction, because this particular speech of army chief reflects an attempt to distract from Pakistan's internal crisis that it has been facing, such as the political instability which has been existing, because Pakistan's main opposition party leader Imran Khan was jailed, right? So political instability was existing, economic fragility, and even insurgency is also another major problem. So ultimately, reviving absolute or outdated ideological tropes rooted in Jinnah's vision for a separate nation or separation. So the two nation theory continues to be institutionally propagated through the school curriculum, public discourse, so ultimately entrenching a narrow and divisive sense of national identity in Pakistan. Despite a number of problems that Pakistan has faced, or number of contradictions that Pakistan had faced post 1971. Right. So in this context, Bangladesh is also coming up with a counter narrative. Remember that Bangladesh was once part of Pakistan, so it was called as East Pakistan. So however, because of 1971 India Pakistan war, Bangladesh became a separate nation. However, on April 2025, so when there were a foreign secretary level talks between Bangladesh and Pakistan, so Bangladesh demanded a long pending apology for Pakistan's army's atrocities in Bangladesh. So these atrocities were committed by Pakistan's army in 1971 Liberation War. And in fact, Bangladesh has also sought a $4 billion as reparations for the damage that Pakistan has caused to the East Pakistan, or the present day Bangladesh. And in fact, Bangladesh also said that there are a lot of assets which were not divided, which were not given by Pakistan to Bangladesh. However, despite signs of diplomatic normalization with Pakistan, between Pakistan and Bangladesh, so there are actually signs of the diplomatic normalization. However, the 1971 actually remains a core issue in Bangladesh national consciousness, right? So still it is being a core issue in the national consciousness of Bangladesh. Thereby it has been creating a paradox between strategic engagement and the collective trauma that the people of Bangladesh have been going through. And in fact, Bangladesh chooses a moral assertion over the strategic realism, because Bangladesh demands of reparations and the apology from the Pakistan's army's atrocities is rooted in ethical recognition of state-sponsored brutality, but not a strategic hostility. Thereby, it has been signifying a principled stance for historical justice rather than purely a transactional foreign policy between India and Pakistan and Bangladesh. So what would be the implications of ideological rigidity for Pakistan? So if we talk about the implications of this ideological rigidity that Pakistan has adopted, a continued denial of ethnic and linguistic grievances, so that were continued to be denied by the Pakistan, and that has resulted in the separation of Pakistan and secession of Bangladesh, right? So continued denial of ethnic and linguistic grievances that were seen earlier in East Pakistan, and now they were seen in Bangladesh. So this is the same thing that has been happening in Balochistan also. So therefore it shows Pakistan's repetition of authoritarian patterns and ignoring lessons from its own disintegration in 1971. Secondly, Pakistan's identity always a reactive and India-centric identity. And in fact, Pakistan's identity is defined by contrast rather than internal coherence. So there is no internal coherence when it comes to Pakistan's identity, and that's why Pakistan's identity is very often questioned. So thus, since Pakistan don't have a consolidated national identity, a strong national identity, it very often limits the national integration and the foreign policy maturity as well. And in fact, the persistent invocation of the two-nation theory will not address the modern threats that Pakistan has been facing, such as terrorism, separatism, regional isolation. But instead, it would entrench the militarized nationalism devoid of any democratic introspection. So that's what the author has been talking about. So that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. And if you have any doubts regarding this lecture, so please feel free to write your doubts in the comment section, and we will address all your doubts. And thank you so much.